Hi, I'm Judy Tyabji. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you had a great weekend. And no, we are not starting a new tradition as to how we end the show and greet the guests. Today we're going under the heading of international issues. As you know, we've profiled Iraq tension in the past. We've also looked at human rights and the landmines issue. Today we're going to revisit the subject of the MAI. As some of you may remember, earlier this year we've looked at the MAI. In fact, we did a two-part series during the election campaign. And then again we looked back at it when Tony Clark came out with a new book. What this refers to is the Multilateral Agreement on Investment. It's a proposal for an international trade document with the OECD countries, which means basically we're going to take NAFTA and expand it to bring in some other countries. And it may go on from there. Some people find the concepts in it a little bit confusing, but they will affect all of us. We've tried to provide a backgrounder for you to make it much more clear. Let's take a look.
Stop Canadian complicity in the genocide of East Timor.
It was hailed as a chance to showcase Canada to the entire Pacific Rim. APEC, an economic summit of 18 countries. What was supposed to be a shot in the arm to Canada's economy ended up being marred by violence and protests. Environmentalists, human rights supporters, child labor demonstrators all filled the streets of Vancouver and the venues at APEC. Instead of promoting our country, protesters ended up turning the spotlight on APEC countries for abusing people and the planet and condemning Canada for hosting these so-called violators. But if this 18-country get-together generated this much furor, it will be hard to imagine what will happen if the MAI, a proposed global trade agreement, goes through. The Multilateral Agreement on Investment is a deal that essentially would take down local barriers for foreign investors. It would not only put transnational companies on a level playing field with domestic businesses, but some say even ahead of local interests. Here's an example of what this deal could do. Under the proposed terms of the agreement, transnational corporations could export to any country they saw fit with no conditions attached, meaning any company could export their product into Canada and sell it at a cut-rate price, which would drastically affect the way Canadian companies operate. Furthermore, they could buy any production facility without being required to maintain its location, viability, or employment. In addition, they wouldn't be required to follow any labor codes or standards, meaning they wouldn't have to pay a minimum wage or give benefits to their employees. Environmental standards would not apply, which would definitely create some animosity here in BC. Foreign investors could use whatever resources they saw fit and not even have to sell their product in Canada or hire local workers. Coupled with relaxed labor, environmental, and safety standards, there would also be no production cap for these foreign companies. As well, they could buy any cultural institution and do with it as they saw fit, like turning the Royal BC Museum into a dance hall, all in the name of fair trade. So for the consumer, it would be a haven of cheap goods, booze, clothing, cars. But for the employee, it could easily mean a job disappearing overnight. With all this going against it, you wonder why more people don't know about it and aren't speaking out against it. Perhaps that's what transnational companies want.
Well, the Multilateral Agreement on Investment is probably not something that's going to be heard of all over the place. However, we hope that people will start talking about what it means. If we have companies in our country, should they be following our laws? We'll talk about this. We'll try to provide some background on what people who favor the MAI think about it. We have two guests with us, and also Gary Lunn will join us by phone. He's in Ottawa right now, and he'll tell us about the subcommittee's report. We'll be back with your calls to this number after the break.
The Tetley tea folk keep making sure they're as fit as they can be to keep making Tetley Canada's favorite cup of tea. It's up to God to count perforations. Better not miss even one. It's taste exercises and obstacle races.
And knowing a round tea bag from 40 paces.
So if you ever stop and wonder why Tetley tea is best, it's because when it comes to taste, Tetley tea folk never rest.
Merry Christmas, baby. Shoot it, treat me nice.
Hi, sweetie. How's LA? Yeah, they do that there. Yeah, the place is looking fine. Pretty empty, though. Any chance you could hop on a plane? Be here for Christmas? Yeah. Yeah, I miss you, too. There's someone at the door.
Merry Christmas, baby.
This holiday from Eden's, discover the new fragrance So de la Renta and receive absolutely free this incredible 5-piece gift set.
How can you give someone a taste of something this refreshing, this cool, this holiday season? Give a Brita water filter system. It's a really cool gift.
I really didn't think I was going to get a kidney. When you're tied down to a schedule just for medical treatment, then you know how little time you have.
An organ donor registry has been introduced in BC that replaces all previous ways to indicate your wishes for organ donation.
More than just quality of life, more than family life, it's a second chance to live.
To sign up, you must fill in a registration card and return it to the BC Transplant Society.
And it's incredible. It's incredible.
And the multilateral agreement on investment is something that is being discussed in Ottawa as we speak here. There have been some public hearings held, and some say that corporations will end up with too much control. And just as we saw in APEC, we may end up with human rights and social issues being low on the list of priorities for governments to address. And we have with us two guests today. Paul Hellyer, thanks for coming back.
Nice to be here.
And Michael Picard, you're with the Council of Canadians.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Paul, you've written a book, The Evil Empire, Globalization's Darker Side.
Right.
Okay, now you're also someone who was the Deputy Prime Minister for some time, so you have some idea of how governments work. I guess I'd have to ask first, and either of you could answer this one, are Canadians even aware of the MAI?
I don't think the majority are. The people I talk to on the street are not. Those who are, thanks to people like Michael and Maud Barlow and others, feel very strongly about it. But the majority, when you say, what do you think about MAI, they say, I beg your pardon?
That's right.
About what?
Are you finding that you're with the Council of Canadians, so you're sort of a group who are trying to promote sort of Canadian interests? Do people know about it?
Well, people increasingly know about it, I think, and when people do hear about it, they tend to get very angry. The conditions of the agreement are hard to understand. It's about investment. It's kind of invisible. It's hard to see.
Right.
But it's very important for the future of Canada and for the future of sovereignty and self-government.
Now, a lot of people have said to me when I talk about this, they say, well, it's so hard to grasp because it's abstract. It's something that's a trade agreement. When they think about, violence in the schools or social issues or health care or pensions, that's very concrete. But actually, if you spend some time with this, the two are very closely related. Would you have any comments?
Very definitely, and I think this is what most Canadians don't know and should know, that the MAI will change our lives profoundly if it's passed. It will end our ability, for example, to maintain a book publishing industry.
And how is that possible?
Well, because Americans will be able to buy our book publishing companies. They will no longer have any protection because we're not allowed to protect anything.
Right.
So they will buy them, and then Canadian authors will find it almost impossible to have their titles published.
But go ahead.
One of the main concepts and principles of the MAI is called national treatment, which means that foreign investors will be entitled to every advantage that governments offer currently to Canadian investors. So with national treatment in place, there's something like it in NAFTA, but within the MAI, with this in place, it'll be increasingly impossible for governments to serve the interests of, say, small business communities and of citizens.
Well, it seems to me that, book publishing, even that, it seems a bit abstract, but when you look at some of the background material and you see that unemployed workers in Port Alberni, for example, who are foresters, are going to be pretty upset if they suddenly see a transnational company come into Port Alberni and bring its own workers and not have to have the same rules that a Port Alberni sawmill would have. Basically they can do whatever they want outside because they're almost in this little bubble.
I think the problem is that they can no longer be subject to conditions.
Right.
We used to say you're welcome in our country if you do so many things. If you locate here, or if you export as much as you import so you don't create a balance of payments problem, or whatever it was that we wanted to say to them. The problem with the MAI is that we will no longer be able to say anything to them.
But, yeah.
They can just come in and buy what they like under the terms of what they like, or even worse, to do what they did with the Bauer Company when they come in and buy it, take the technology, then move production to a third world company and leave 200 people unemployed in Canada that we have to look after. And so this sort of thing can happen, ad infinitum, and this is what is going to be set in concrete if we sign this agreement.
Okay, we want to give you some background. We have Gary Lunn standing by as well, and he's going to tell us what's happening in Ottawa and whether or not some of the controversy has percolated up to the subcommittee level. But first, let's give you one example of what's happening already under NAFTA. Now, NAFTA being the North American Free Trade Agreement, it followed the free trade agreement that we have with the United States, and many say the MAI is the next step of NAFTA. So let's take a look at one example of what's happened. And this is a good example of how corporate power is already overpowering government. It's the case of the American fuel company, Ethel Corporation, versus the Canadian government. Ethel Corp filed a damage claim against the federal government on April 14th. That was after Ottawa passed a law banning the use of the gasoline fuel additive, MMT, in Canada for health reasons. Ethel Corp claims the ban amounts to an expropriation of their production plant. It's a bit of a stretch. Ethel Corp is seeking $345 million in damages. They claim their product is safe and has been used in Canada for 20 years. This claim for damages is allowed under NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Other lawsuits by foreign companies would also be allowed for similar reasons under the terms of the MAI. And this claim for damages will be heard in private, not in a court of law. The decision on whether or not $345 million should be paid out will be made by a panel. This panel will have one person from each side of the dispute and a third person appointed jointly by the people to the dispute. None of the records of the hearings will be open to the public at any time, and if Canada loses, there can be no appeal. And critics of the MAI say that under that trade agreement, governments would have to roll back any laws already on the books that grant health, safety, or environmental protection to the public if those measures restrict corporate profits, or if, as can be said in this case, an expropriation argument, meaning that the government's basically taken over that company. Seems like a bit of a stretch, but obviously it keeps some lawyers busy. Gary Lunn, are you there?
I'm there. Good afternoon, Judy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. This is quite topical as the subcommittee on international trade studying the multilateral agreement on investment met this morning for 2 hours.
Okay, well that's great. And now I guess what I have to ask you is, you're making recommendations, are you?
Yes, the subcommittee is presenting a report to the House and to the negotiating people as they go into their final round of negotiations. And there was a number of recommendations put forward. I can tell you that the big ones that sort of, one of the ones very disappointing for me today is the opposition. We brought forth a motion that we want the MAI should be tabled in Parliament with at least enough time to allow a full parliamentary debate before the government takes any binding action. This was, as you could guess, debated very heavily. And
now you're in Ottawa right now, so when you say that you brought this motion forward to have a debate, and that was debated, was that in the committee or in the Parliament?
No, within the subcommittee.
Within the subcommittee, you had this big debate, okay.
As one of the recommendations to the House. And it was a split vote, and the chairman had to deciding vote, and he voted against that motion. In other words, not to allow a parliamentary debate. And
so our MPs aren't even going to have a parliamentary debate on the MAI?
Well, not in the House of Commons, and I was very frustrated. I'm in support of this, and I'm writing a dissenting opinion to go in the report. They say, well, we're parliamentarians, we're sitting in a subcommittee debating this, but I believe something that this important that will affect the lives of all Canadians. And again, I don't take the view of your guests entirely. There are concerns, but I think there's also benefits. But even then, it's such a very, very drastic measures that's going to affect so many people, good and, positive and negatively, that this is something that deserves a full parliamentary debate in the House.
Okay, now having said that, what other recommendations are you made? I mean, are you guys actually dealing with what's in the document or just how you're going to treat the document?
Well, we've gone through the document, we've looked at the different areas, and we're looking at areas that we think to have need to be further addressed, i.e. Individual labor standards. Again, that'll be in minority report. I don't think the government goes far enough.
In protecting Canadian labor standards, you mean?
That's right, that we want autonomy within the agreement. So we want an exemption from the MAI that we control our own labor standards. We're not bound by anything. Now, they've got it in there, but it's very weak. And I always believe that silence is consent. So if we don't talk about, i.e. also culture, they want to follow the France model, a very broad self-interpreted cultural protection amongst all nations, but it's within all the participants of the MAI to interpret what does that mean. And I say, no, we have to be very, very specific what we mean. You know, you can't go with a wishy-washy exemption. It has to make sure, and likewise on the environment.
Okay, now having said, so environment and labor are things you've raised, but where do we go from here, Gary? I mean, are we basically saying that you've got a draft document, you guys are trying to tinker with it a little bit, there isn't going to be a full debate in the House of Commons? What are we looking at? I mean, basically, it sounds like the Liberals have said, okay, this is more or less a done deal with a few amendments. What kind of timeline are we looking at here?
I believe it's going to Paris in late April or May.
Okay.
And you're absolutely right. It's basically a done deal. We can make these recommendations, but as you know, and you're been in the legislature yourself, that the majority of this subcommittee is Liberals.
Right.
And we are making recommendations and some concerns, but I don't think we go far enough. They're not as strong as I would like to see. I think there's some benefits in the MAI, and there are some exemptions, but we have those concerns.
Okay, I just have one last question here, because we can't keep you too long here, but do you think that the interest that Canadians have expressed in having this receive more attention is one reason why there were the public hearings and the subcommittee reported? I mean, do you think that people speaking out has made a difference in that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were pressuring the government right in the beginning that you know they want a full consultation process, and the government has to it has to be transparent. And I'm not even so sure that they have been up until now. I mean, this is something that is so big, so important. It should be debated in the House of Commons, where it's going to get a lot more attention, and that's not happening. So it is basically going through. I generally agree with it, with reservations in some areas, and will continue to speak as the international trade critic against those.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gary, and good luck with your work.
I appreciate your time. Thanks, Judy.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Bye. And that was Gary Lunn, and he is one of the critics for the Reform Party, the official opposition in the House of Commons. Sounds like one of the things we might be able to affect is a debate. I mean, if that's one of the things that they came so close, you've got experience in this.
I think it's an outrage.
Yeah.
Really, an outrage that it wouldn't be considered by Parliament. And I don't even think that Parliament has the right to do this, because they're amending the Constitution unilaterally.
How are they amending the Constitution?
Well, because it takes away from both Parliament and powers that the Constitution gives them.
Right.
And gives it to, in effect, a world government run by and for the benefit of international companies.
But in terms of process, if he says that, I mean, some people in the background, especially on the internet and certain groups, have made a lot of noise about the MAI so far, and that's led to a public consultation, whatever we may have thought of it, and a subcommittee. It sounds like maybe we should push a little harder and try to get a House of Commons
we should have a binding referendum. They should not sign this without a binding referendum of the Canadian people. Because at the time of the last election, MPs didn't know about it, even though it had been debated for 2 years, for more than 2 years. I got up in an all-party candidate meeting and mentioned the MAI, and there were nothing but blank stares from all the other candidates. They'd never heard of it. And I think it's outrageous. It wasn't in the platform of any of the parties. And if it's put through, even put through the House of Commons with a majority vote using the whip, I do not think that something so important as to change the future of the country, and in my effect, in my terms, I believe if they sign it, that we'll be the 51st state within 10 years. I do not think they have the right to do that without the consent of the Canadian people.
Okay, we have to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk to Paul Hellyer, who's written The Evil Empire, and also Michael Picard. We'll be taking your calls in the next segment.
Tyabji is brought to you in part by Metro Lexus Toyota, leaders in customer satisfaction.
This holiday only at Eden's. Choose Poème or Trésor and receive free this 4-piece Lancôme bonus with lipstick and refillable spray.
Jumbo Metrics by Conair, the ultimate styling tool for every new fashion trend in hair. With enough attachments to crimp, straighten, and curl, including a brush for softer effect or a smoother look. It's a mini salon in one.
America, millions of you have skinny hair. Stop hiding it.
From Conair Volume Control, you've got the Big Curl Setter. 5 soft surface jumbo rollers with super clips. Go from skinny to full of body.
Nobody's bigger in hair than Conair.
Check TV. It's here. George and Leo. Tonight.
Well, what are you doing?
I'm writing something that requires concentration and silence.
Oh. Can 2 people do it?
George and Leo. It's here. Tonight. Check TV.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, that's a new addition to the family.
Oh, just beautiful. It's got ABS brakes, easier access than ever, side door impact beams, 40 standard safety features, and it's got a 5-star rating and front-end crash test.
And right now, Windstar comes with an all-star deal with our new 98 model at only $249 a month, but only at your BC Ford and Mercury dealer and only for a limited time.
And how about that gorgeous little baby?
He likes it too.
Overtime pay for all the elves. It's busting our budget. We'll save a ton if we deliver our gifts in, August.
Move Christmas? Never. Our budget's fine, thanks to the money we saved at Canadian Tire.
This Noma 6-foot Ponderosa Christmas tree is $59.99. This Snow Falcon is $39.99. And this Brooks Fashion Doll's just $9.99.
Vacation's off. Back to work.
Why?
Because we're elves. It's what we do. Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa.
And save like Scrooge.
And today we have Paul Hellyer on. He's the author of The Evil Empire and the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Michael Picard is with the Council of Canadians and actually also has the Philosopher's Cafe in Victoria. Isn't that right?
That's right. Each Tuesday night. Appropriately, our topic tomorrow night is, are we losing our values?
Right. Something that people will like to talk about from a number of different aspects, I guess. We're going straight to the phones, and we'd like to hear from you on what you think of this. And also, if you've never heard of the MAI, then I think it's important for people to call in and tell us what they think of it so far. Let's talk to Bonnie in Vancouver. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
Hi.
I must say I have only watched your show a couple of times, and I am really amazed at your program. Hats off to you, girl.
Oh, thanks.
I, as a Canadian, I sometimes wonder, we have allowed to come into our country the freedom of religion, immigration laws, even with the ESL programs, allowing and implementing all these other cultural standards to come in and rule our country.
Right.
I feel we have, as Canadians, have lost our own identity, and I certainly will say, you know, are we really losing our values as Canadians?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And actually, since that's your subject tomorrow night, that's a good question for you to answer.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to remember that traditionally in Canada there has been this public space for schools, for education, for in healthcare and pensions, and increasingly these areas are being open to and exposed to the market, and market outcomes are going to decide how those how issues that come up in those domains.
Like the so-called profit ethic, which is almost an oxymoron, you know.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And the problem with the MAI is that this process will be accelerated, and that it will become increasingly impossible for governments to reverse those effects. To start to say that no, we should have more public funding for education, or we should have more public funding for healthcare, because those are markets in the eyes of transnational corporations who do not want to see those sort of government programs in place.
And I guess too, there have been some examples where an apprenticeship program could be seen as an industry subsidy. You know, where you say because the government is spending public money on that, and someone could grieve that, which would be kind of a problem. Let's talk to Rosemary now. Rosemary in Vancouver?
Yeah, hi, this is Rosemary Larson here in Vancouver. Yeah, I'm sorry Mr. Lunn is no longer on the program, because what I would like to say to him and to the Reform Party is that they have really let BCers who voted for them down. They're letting the whole country down. They're in a perfect position as the official opposition to take the Liberal government to task for letting us down even worse. They have a mandate to not continue with Mulroney's agenda.
Right.
They did not have a mandate to sign NAFTA. They're going one step further and escalating it into the MAI.
Right.
So what Mr. Lunn and his comrades in reform in the Parliament could have done all along, is demand cross-country national hearings in every major center in the country, so that people could find out what's in the MAI, because as your guests have pointed out, nobody knows.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to actually direct that to Paul Hellyer. I think that's an excellent point. She said that they had no mandate for NAFTA. In fact, the first time this Liberal government was elected, they said they'd scrap NAFTA.
They said they would renegotiate the FTA.
Which, of course, forget it.
Which they didn't do.
But the other thing is that the Foreign Investment Review Agency was something that actually used to protect Canadian businesses. Now we've gone from the free trade agreement to NAFTA to now the possible MAI. It's the completely opposite direction. What happened?
Absolutely. And under NAFTA, foreign control of our industries is increasing in petroleum and forest industries and so on, right across the board. And two major changes in the MAI. One, those exceptions that we negotiated under NAFTA, which were financial institutions, including our banks, and telecommunications, including Bell Telephone and so on.
We negotiated changes to the banks in NAFTA?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And also our culture. We will ultimately lose them all, so that in future, foreign investors will be able to buy our financial institutions, including our banks. They'll be able to buy privately owned radio stations or TV stations. They'll be able to buy our book manufacturers. They'll be able to buy our magazine outlets. They'll be able to buy anything and everything. And the big difference, and I think this is an important point that we haven't made yet, is that under NAFTA and the free trade agreement, if push comes to shove, if they get so far along that we say, hey, this far, no further, we can abrogate in 6 months. But under the MAI, it's 5 years plus a 15-year grandfather right for anybody who was already invested. So we're locked in for 20 years.
Wow.
And that is the reason that I say if we sign MAI, it's goodbye Canada, and that's what I really feel, and that's why I went to the trouble to write the book.
Okay, and we're going to be back after a quick break, but before the break, we want to let you know that if you think that there should be, for example, a debate in the House of Commons, and if you're concerned about what you hear, regardless, as Gary Lunt says, even if you think foreign investment is a good idea, but you don't like this deal, you can send letters to protest to the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien, PCMP. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. He's in the House of Commons, Ottawa, Ontario, K1A OA6. And that's the best place for you to be writing right now. And if you want information on the MAI, you can get it probably at your local library and certainly on the internet. And we'll be back after a quick break.
$150 horsepower, and that's no bull. Neon, more power than Cavalier and Sunfire for only $169 a month.
Hey! 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 Hello!
You'll find Neon's wide open spaces are something to shout about. Neon, more room inside for $288 a month, no money down.
Wow. Wow.
Your hair looks too healthy to be hairsprayed.
Imagine, great hold that feels healthy.
Some hairsprays can be sticky. Introducing new Pantene Pro Vitamin Hairspray with Elastase, our new flexible holding ingredient for great hold that's flexible. Unlike some hairsprays that can be sticky, this new Pantene holds without all that stickiness. Try this new Pantene Hairspray with Elastase.
Feel your hair, not your hairspray.
The Grime Zones. They're tough, they're all over the house, and they're about to meet their match. Introducing new Stronger Mr. Clean, now with even more muscle. For tough grime, like stovetop grease, mudroom muck, and kids being kids dirt. It all shines clean, because new Mr. Clean muscles under to lift off dirt. Faster, better than the leading pine cleaner. Mr. Clean takes the tough out of Grime Zones. Everywhere, new Mr. Clean shines through, even better than before.
Hey, don't switch that dial, cause this is gonna make you smile. See these warm, toasty sweaters for your family? At 30% off, put them under your tree. And comfy, cozy robes, all at 25% off now. And only at Eaton's, wow! 30% off men's dress shirts and ties. There's Christian Dior, Arrow, Hathaway, and Distinction for all you guys. And there's me, Mr. Magical Moose, only $9.93.
And we're talking about the multilateral agreement on investment, and we'll go straight to the phones and see how many calls we can get in. We'll start with Noreen in Sydney. Hi, Noreen.
Hi, Judy. The reason I'm calling is the impact on healthcare.
Right.
And my concern is that should we open it up, the American companies could see the healthcare in Canada as being unfairly subsidized.
Right.
And that would result in them being able to take over the management and imposing that type of healthcare structure, which in the States has resulted in only 1/3 of Americans being able to afford healthcare.
Right.
And I would like a response from your panelists to see if my understanding is reasonable.
Okay, well, I think that's a very important concern. Is that true that healthcare, that you were making some reference to that actually?
Yeah, well, the thing is that corporations will be able to challenge existing laws, regulations, and practices and claim that they offer an unfair advantage, much as Ethel Corporation is suing the government for similar issues.
So in that case, the money that they're grieving, the $345 million or whatever it is, that's going to come from the taxpayers.
Right, that's exactly right, and these corporations will be able to insist that they receive comparable benefits. So it's not that necessarily that the benefits will have to be removed, although that might be the only practical option for government. It's that the benefits, subsidies, tax breaks, and those kinds of things will have to be also offered to international lenders.
So another healthcare company could come in here and say, well, we need the same advantages as your government-funded healthcare
Right,
system.
and there'll be nothing that the government can do to prevent that from happening.
Okay, let's talk to Frank now in Port Coquitlam.
Yes, hello. I heard Mr. Hellyer mention that foreign ownership of radio and telecommunications. In the case of the CBC, that might be a good thing, but that's not what I called about. What I did phone about is there were a couple of cases last year in the province of Ontario that sound very much like this case with the Ethel Corporation, where the litigants weren't named, the reason for the trial wasn't stated, and the outcome was not, like everything was in total secrecy. Does Mr. Hellyer know if there have been any other cases that have gone before the courts in Canada?
That's a really good question.
I don't really know the answer. I know that there have been some, like the ones named, but one thing that is relevant, I think, is that Bob Rae, when he was elected, had promised Ontario government car insurance. And I'm not personally a great fan of that, but that's what he was elected on. And then when he went to try and implement it, State Farm Mutual said, if you do, we will sue you for, billions. It was over $1 billion.
$1.3 billion.
$1.3 billion and potential lost revenue. So in effect, he lost his sovereignty. The Ontario people lost their sovereignty to do what their elected government had promised that they would do if elected. And so what you're going to find under the MAI is just an extension of this NAFTA provision, and our governments are going to be fearful of doing all sorts of things that they might think were in our interest, for fear of getting sued if they do.
Well, I noticed that there was an article published in Vancouver Sun. Owen Lippert is with the Fraser Institute, and he actually is very strongly in favor of the MAI. And one of the things he says that the MAI is not a political document, it's an investment document, and that these investment rules restrict the arbitrary acts of government rather than, as claimed, giving transnational corporations any special new rights. So he's trying to say that it's not that they have new rights, it just restricts government from interfering with what they're doing.
Well, it is about government restriction, that's right. But I think that it's important to remember that investment is a political issue. Economic issues are political issues, and he who pays the piper calls the tune. And if already Canada has a lot of foreign and direct investment, and 25% of the federal debt is owned by foreigners. And I think that issues of public debt count as investment here.
Okay, let's take another call. We'll talk now to Mike in Duncan. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I work for a multinational company right now. We've been on strike for 5 months now, and I'm sure you know who they are.
Right.
But if the MAI went through, what's stopping them from just canceling our right to strike, telling us you're coming back to work, or we're bringing in other people from outside the country?
Replacement workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question, actually. If it doesn't affect our labor standards, what would prevent a multinational forest company, for example, from bringing in their own workers?
I don't think that multinationals will be able to bring in workforces. The MAI doesn't allow them to do that. Top, specialists and
It's
top
not
personnel.
defined. If you read it, actually, it's not defined to necessarily say specialists, but
yeah,
the implication's there, but it's not. Anyway.
Who's a specialist? But it's still, and they may not be able to challenge labor standards directly. But even if they don't, there may be some way for them to do that. But even if they don't, the point is that our labor environment will be put into direct competition with other countries and so there can be a downward pressure on labor standards.
Well, I think we saw that with the Maple Leaf meat packers, right? I mean, they basically closed down and moved somewhere else.
Right, which is exactly what corporations will be able to do. Governments won't be able to prevent them from closing down. They won't be able to require that they hire a certain number of people, or so on.
Okay, let's talk to Myrna in Victoria. Hi, Myrna.
Hi there. I just wanted to make sure that the MPs in the Liberal Party will come on TV and declare that each one of them has personally read that MIA agreement and that it is good for this country and that they will be answerable to the people of their constituency. Because usually when an agreement is that long, like maybe 500 pages or whatever, they do not read it personally and they don't know what it contains. They just vote with the party. Now, an agreement as important as this should be at the fingertips of every MP. It is their responsibility to read it and to understand it, and that there will be no misunderstanding like contained water, meaning bottled water or water in tanks, and now it means water in reservoirs or canals.
Right.
So they've got to understand this, and that the writing and the interpretation of the language must be clear, and there must be notes to the written law to explain things. Like contained water does not mean only bottled water or water in tanks.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And what she's referring to there, of course, is that when they have water in the agreement, now they're talking about our entire reservoirs. Paul Hellyer, you were elected. You know what she's talking about. Why don't you speak to... How many do you think have read it?
Of the members of Parliament read the whole thing? Yeah. I would guess 5.
Out of 305?
Yes.
That's kind of shocking.
I would doubt that more have. Some of them would probably claim to. But, and I don't think even all of the ministers have read it. In fact, I would bet a year's salary, which isn't very high anymore, that they haven't. And recently the government circulated to the departments that are directly affected, like environment and forestry and so on, a copy of the draft, but they expurgated it and took out some of
expurgated meaning that they edited it.
Yeah, they took out some of the most important parts, which some of these departments, I'm sure, would have been very concerned about, as those of us who have read the whole document are.
Do you think that if they read it, that they would then say, wait a minute, we can't vote for this?
I think they would have second sober thoughts, yes.
Oh, well, that's encouraging at least to know that. Okay, we have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk more about the MAI, the Multilateral Agreement on Investment. We'll be taking your calls.
Hey, don't switch that dial, because this is going to make you smile.
From red tabs to silver tabs, all Levi's jeans and tops for men, women, and kids are now 25% off.
And me, Mr. Magical Moves, only $9.93.
Sweden. Sundin, Forsberg, Janssen.
Yeah, and the Russians, Fedorov, Yashin, Bure.
Yeah, I know those guys, they're tough.
You guys talking about the Russians? Did I ever tell you guys that I played against the Russians in '72?
The Esso Olympic Hockey Heroes Collection, stars, profiles, and more. A new set every week. Just $2.99 each with your free Esso Extra card.
I was on the bench yelling at Esposito that Henderson was all alone in front. I don't think he would have seen him.
This Christmas, go wireless. Only your BCTEL Mobility Center has all the latest in wireless communications. Personal pagers, cell phones, and digital PCS, all at over 80 locations. This Christmas, be free. BCTEL Mobility.
Check TV. It's here. George and Leo. Tonight.
Well, what are you doing? I'm writing something that requires concentration and silence.
No. Can two people do it?
George and Leo. It's here tonight. Check TV.
This holiday only at Eden's. Choose Poème or Trésor and receive free this 4-piece Lancome bonus with lipstick and refillable spray.
Eden's at your favorite store. Eden's.
This holiday from Eden's. Experience the sense of Calvin Klein with this 5-piece gift set. One for men, one for women. Yours for only $40.
Eden's at your favorite store.
And we're talking to Paul Hellyer, who is the author of The Evil Empire, Globalization's Darker Side, and he's written not just on the MAI, but also on things like the banks and things like debt. For example, if you can see that pie chart, I know you don't have to see it all, but basically the part that isn't black represents what we've borrowed, and the part that is black is compound interest. Now, I find that to be a very frightening thing. And I'm talking about our national debt. So, for example, $574,000 billion is our net public debt from compound interest at the end of 95, 96.
It was at 547 billion, yes.
That's unbelievable. And and then about 30 billion is what we've borrowed.
Well, the other was what we spent on healthcare and education.
Right.
And all of the rest of the debt is due to compound interest.
Wow, that's amazing. And Michael Picard, you're with the Council of Canadians. You wanted to say something? I know you can.
Well,
I can tell.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's important to remember that the federal debt is also an asset to those people who it's owed to. And increasingly, over the last 25 years, foreigners have owned a larger proportion of the debt, and the Bank of Canada has owned significantly less.
And that's a change.
And that's a significant change from the post-war period, as Paul Hellyer points out in his book. And it's important to see that kind of government financing benefits the banks, it benefits the lenders, but it doesn't benefit Canadians or the government.
Okay, so that also would take away some of our ability to say, no, this is how we want to do it if someone's holding. It's like your banker. I mean, your banker calls the shots sometimes. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Let's talk to Greg first in Sydney. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good.
Go ahead.
Great show. Great topic.
Thanks.
I think this is one of the most important issues facing Canadians right now, and I'd like to thank Mr. Hellyer. I think this country needs more people like him. People have got to start paying attention to what's going on around them. But I've read this document, and it's the scariest document I've ever seen. And I run a transnational company myself, and the problem is that the only thing governing these transnationals is going to be their own corporate and social responsibility. And you're probably aware, a lot of them are bankrupt in that department. And Canada will truly be finished as a country. And as a Canadian, I really am concerned about that.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment. It's kind of funny because on Friday we had Gilles Duceppe on, and the federal government spends so much energy and so much money trying to sort of fight the separatist cause and is negotiating the MAI, which a lot of people think, I mean, yes, we need to be in a good global free trade environment, but not necessarily by giving away the farm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the internal unity problem is being overtaken by this external takeover problem. And if the MAI is signed and the foreign investment in Canada rises to the point where we can no longer service the debt, the royalties and the dividends and things that are going out, that's the day we have to run down our flag and run up the stars and stripes. And so,
but is it necessarily even an American takeover? I mean, how much better off are
well,
they?
I think the Americans are closest to us, that big elephant. And coming back to the monetary thing, which we haven't really talked about and don't want to get into in any great depth, as long as the banks have a monopoly on money creation, which is part and parcel of this whole process of globalization coming out of Chicago School and the change in the 1970s. As long as they have this monopoly in creating money, then whoever can create the most money can buy the world. And it's not Canada, it's the United States and Japan and Germany.
I want to think, though, that, well, I can't get into a big, we shouldn't talk about monetary policy.
No, we won't.
I was going to make a comment.
But
I'm sure they're related.
It is relevant in the sense that we are putting ourselves in competition with people that we are not in a position to compete with. That's what it really means.
It's relevant because this is about investment and foreign investment, and those who can create the money can lend the money and And just as the banker owns your house, so the bankers own the investments.
Judy, allow
I
me
was just going
one
to
minute
ask, though, if you're creating money, though, and you're also creating inflation. I mean, but you're going to get back to the
let me
phones.
let me give you a concrete example.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, 2 American banks created out of thin air $500 million for an American company to buy out Dominion Textiles in Montreal, one of Canada's oldest textile companies. Now, they created the money out of thin air to buy real assets in this country.
Right.
Now, that is what can happen, is happening, and one of the reasons that both Michael and I are so concerned, because it's all part of the development of this evil empire, which is...
Okay, I have
occurring.
Christine on the line from Vancouver, actually. Christine, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, hi, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Judy. I just feel that the whole thing is a done deal, and I don't think we have any control over it.
Right.
I think it's the next step to the New World Order, which is governed by something greater than ourselves.
Oh, okay.
And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks for that. That's kind of gloomy, but having said all of that, what do we do from here? I mean, what can you do from here?
Well, I can appreciate the sense that she expressed, because it does seem like a done deal. It's been in private negotiation for so long. Such an important issue, and the government has not lived up to its public responsibility to discuss this with the population.
But I mean, eventually
still
Canadians will catch up with it.
Right, and I still believe that we can do something, because we must address our concerns to every level of government. Every level of government will be affected and constrained by the effects of the
Including
agreement.
municipal governments.
Municipal governments, provincial governments. We have to talk to our chambers of commerce. We have to talk to social organizations.
Because local businesses will be seriously affected.
Small businesses are those who create the jobs, and so it's very important to get to them when they find out that they won't be able to be preferred in government programs in any kind of subsidies or tax breaks for small business. There's going to be a tremendous amount of outrage, even from the business sector. This is not a left-right issue, it doesn't seem to me.
Okay, well, we have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of your calls. We're talking about the MAI.
This holiday from Eaton's, experience the sense of Calvin Klein with this 5-piece gift set. One for men, one for women. Yours for only $40.
Eaton's has your fragrance store.
Old Spice. It's all in how you use it.
I'm Chris Holm, and this is Amelia. I don't think anybody is ever really prepared to be a father. My wife and I, we share all the responsibilities. My job's the laundry. Amelia generates a lot of tough stains. Obviously, I had to find some help, so I looked on the internet and found stuff that all parents need to know.
Tide with bleach gets out most tough stains Amelia gets into better than the leading detergent, and it helps keep colors bright.
It helps when you know what you're doing.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide.
You have to learn fast to survive.
Bridget died of spinal muscular atrophy before her first birthday. This muscular dystrophy is the leading cause of genetic infant death in Canada. Until there's a cure, there's us, the Muscular Dystrophy Association of Canada.
Whoa! There's a blizzard coming your way. It's the famous Dairy Queen Blizzard Flavor Treat, and it's free. Because right now, when you purchase any Super Value meal at participating Dairy Queen stores, it comes with a free Blizzard. Imagine any 12-ounce Blizzard Flavor Treat absolutely free with a Super Value meal of your choice, including grilled chicken or ultimate home-style burger, along with fries and a soft drink. Talk about super. For hot eats, cool treats, think DQ.
And coming up tomorrow, a show on BC Ferries. Then Wednesday, we're doing an update on the hepatitis C situation. Thursday, completely frivolous Christmas shopping, maybe even multinational toys. Who knows? And on Friday, UNICEF, it's the International Children's Day of Broadcasting. And so we'll put something together for you then. I wonder if BC Ferries would be seen as a government subsidy. Not these days, I guess. But anyway, let's start our calls with Michael on the Sunshine Coast.
Yes, hi, Judy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to address my comments to Paul.
Okay.
First, hi, Paul.
Firstly, I'd like to just comment that I'm outraged that this sort of document has been passed through the subcommittee and wasn't allowed to go into the House for debate.
Right.
Myself, I disagree with the MAI in principle and think that we need to stay at home more and support business in Canada.
Right.
Up on the coast here, the unemployment rate is 25%, and not enough is being done.
Right.
I guess the question I have is why doesn't the government invest its attention on helping Canadian companies instead of going abroad like with these other agreements?
Right. I think that's a perfect question. Why?
Well, this whole question of employment is, in my mind, the most important one. I think the level of unemployment in this country today is a scandal, an absolute national scandal.
See, for you, it's easy for you to say that and have credibility because you remember when it wasn't like this.
It was not. In
Some of us don't
1961, we had 1% inflation and 3% unemployment. It would be great to have that again. And this is one of the reasons that the government says we need more foreign investment for jobs. Well, this is not true. First of all, foreign investment has increased 100% in the last 10 years, which is as fast as we can absorb. Faster, I would say, because we're getting to the point where we can't service all of the money going out to pay the dividends.
Right.
But more than 90% of the direct foreign investment in recent years has been for takeovers of Canadian companies, existing Canadian companies. And that results
So you're saying they're not bringing anything new in?
No, and they're taking jobs out because
the profits.
They take profits out, but they downsize, and there's less demand for Canadian accounting services and legal and all of this sort of thing. And then the other reason they give is that Canadian companies need it for help in investing elsewhere in the world. Well, Canadian direct foreign investment in other countries has gone way up in the last 10 years too.
Right.
And they seem to be doing very well without this.
Right.
And I just say there is no real excuse, no benefit really on the investment side, giving up a lot of sovereignty, and no net advantage on jobs, maybe a disadvantage.
Okay, let's talk to Maureen in Victoria. Hi, Maureen.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, go ahead.
Okay, I'm really, awash here listening to all this detail, although I have had an opportunity to read some of the document. I have to tell you that I am really shocked at the contempt for Canada that is shown in the document. It's as if we're just some sort of a faceless, mindless emporium waiting to be exploited. Right. There's no concept of Canada, of Canadians, of what makes us the most desirable place to live in all these foreign lists. Yeah. I was wondering, though, specifically about the Aboriginal rights and treaties that we're so proud of and that we've fought so hard to get accomplished. Could this be regarded as some sort of a grandfather clause that because we've made arrangements with people that were here before that they may be in some way exempted? Can Canada's identity be salvaged by the very people we took the country away from?
Well, that's interesting to bring that in.
I believe that the federal government is trying to get some exemptions or reservations for Indigenous peoples. I think that's correct. It's important to remember, however, that exemptions are all temporary and subject to review, and they're subject to this clause called standstill, which means that the government can't increase the kind of protection that it might take out in a reservation, and it will have to phase out those exemptions. So there's
so that everybody ends up going through the federal government instead of having to deal with the bands individually.
I don't think that would be the consequence, but to the extent that bands are developing self-government, or some are, it's subnational governments will also be subject to the conditions of MAI.
That's what I'm saying. They'll have to deal with the federal government rather than they won't be able to deal with them directly. Yeah. Okay, let's talk to Elizabeth now in North Vancouver. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
I would like to make two comments. One, about the banks.
Right.
It is very important to include the banks in this because the Americans can take over the Bank of Canada, and that Bank of Canada is our only salvation. And I would like Mr. Hellyer in a moment to comment on that, because that could save Canada. And people have to understand how important the Bank of Canada is to us and how it can be used.
Okay.
Secondly, I'd like him to comment on, and I don't think people understand that all the interest that is paid out to the banks, all the profit, that comes from the taxpayers. I don't think that's understood.
Right.
And secondly, when he spoke to the subcommittee on the MAI in Ottawa, he commented on the free trade agreement in 1987.
Right.
That Ronald Reagan accomplished what the American armies and generals could not do in the wars of 1776 and 1812. He says that Ronald Reagan actually conquered Canada and stripped of us all our rights. And the MAI wants to do the West.
Okay, and I have to stop you there. You won't have time to answer. So, okay, your comments on that.
Well, I think it would be terrible if we lost control of our banking system, of our monetary system. I don't think there's much chance of them being able to buy the Bank of Canada, although there is pressure already coming from these same multinational corporations to have a single currency for all North America, and I would hate to see that, because that in effect too involves loss of sovereignty.
But we're almost there. I guess where I'm seeing this is we're almost there on so many of these things. I mean, we've got NAFTA, we've got the American currency is almost
But
a
the reason we're
currency.
here today is because we want to say stop. We want to get off this train before it goes over the cliff. That's the reason we're here.
Okay. And the Council of Canadians is doing some work, I
Right,
guess, to...
and it's important also to remember that MAI goes way beyond NAFTA. This is certainly not just a free trade deal. Neither was NAFTA, for that matter. It's about investment, it's about ownership, and it's about control, and it's therefore about sovereignty and the power of governments to serve the interests of Canadians.
Ultimately, whether we're going to have Canada or whether we're not.
Okay, and people can debate this with you tomorrow night at your Philosopher's Cafe.
I hope it comes up.
Okay, and thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, now if you'd like to contact us on this or other subjects, this is how you can do it. You can write to Tyabji, 780 Kings Road, Victoria, BC, V8T 5A2. Fax us at 250-389-1226, and email is tyabji@wic.ca, and our internet website has information from this and from other shows, and we'll be right back.
This holiday only at Eden's. Choose Poème or Trésor and receive free this 4-piece Lancôme bonus with lipstick and refillable spray.
Eden's has your fragrance store. Eden's.
This holiday from Eden's, experience the sense of Calvin Klein with this 5-piece gift set. One for men, one for women. Yours for only $40.
Eden's has your fragrance store.
So you've been watching the free preview of the new cable package, exploring new boundaries with space, the imagination station. And still had time for a little golf with the Golf Channel. While enjoying some Superstation entertainment on TBS. Just 3 of the many channels in the new cable package. The free preview ends soon. To order, call 1-888-591-1997. You could win great prizes, so turn on, tune in, and enjoy.
This is the Pacific Coast Savings Member Card. You can use it for direct payment at grocery stores, restaurants, and other retailers across Canada. And for easy access to cash machines around the globe. So as soon as you have a member card, all this convenience can be yours, no matter where you are or how hard you're working. Visit your Pacific Coast Savings branch and ask about the member card today.
Make the Bay your destination this Christmas and discover our beautiful world of fragrances. Give a gift that's the essence of style. Give the gift of Alfred Sung, and with a minimum purchase of $50 from the Sung Alfred Sung collection, receive this fabulous gift, which includes eau de parfum spray, body lotion, and bath and shower gel. The scents of the season are here at the Bay, your fragrance headquarters this Christmas.
We've been hearing quite a bit about BC ferry rate hikes lately, and some islanders say they won't stop the protests until someone at BC Ferries listens. We'll talk about this and the possibility of a subsidy tomorrow. Yeah, and let's see how long it takes before that subsidy gets challenged. Today we were talking about the multilateral agreement on investment. It's something some of you have heard of before. many of you may have just heard of today, but it affects all of us, and it looks like if we don't make enough noise, the government's planning to sign on early next year. Now, I think that Gary Lunn at the beginning of the show raised an important point. We should right now be fighting for a debate on the floor of the House of Commons. I think we could get that. That will help open this issue up to the general public, and then we can start to debate the terms. I'm Judy Tyabji. That's my opinion. What's yours?